This video is a more streamlined version of the What is Existence series, with all 3 parts in one. Here I ask questions about the nature of reality as a way of better appreciating the beauty and mystery of being. It's all pretty complex, so don't hesitate to pause or take a break at any time. I begin in part 1 wondering about what it means for something to be real, and what it takes for things, or anything at all, to exist. So, what is existence? That is, what is reality? What does it take for something to exist? In this video series, the word existence explicitly refers to absolutely everything at once. If something exists, has ever existed, or can possibly exist, that thing is part of existence. I'll also use the word reality as a synonym for existence, and say also that something is real if it is part of reality. Let's first examine the nature of things which we hold to be inarguably real, objective physical objects like computers, tables, and water. It's difficult to really imagine being able to doubt the existence of these things, because our day-to-day livelihood depends on being able to reliably interact with and manipulate objects such as these. After handling such objects over the course of a lifetime, it becomes clear that they all share 2 absolutely fundamental characteristics. They exist over time, and they take up space. The fact that all physical objects possess these qualities suggests that they are quite important, so let's examine them each in turn. Spatiality. The spatial form an object takes up is comprised of the geometric relationships that every point on that object has to every other. For example, this point on the glass stands in relation to this point on the glass, and this point, and integrating all of these relations into the cumulative relationship that point has to the rest of the glass represents the position that point occupies in the glass. The same is true of every point on the glass. If any one of these points had a different geometric relationship with the rest of the glass, no matter how minute, the glass would have a different form. This general pattern of an object's form representing the geometric relationships between every point on that object applies to any physical object. Without these relationships to make up the information pertaining to the object's exact form, the object would not embody that form. The existence of its spatial form depends on the existence of its geometric interrelations. The spatial nature of existence contains not only every object's geometric relationship with itself, but every geometric relationship between all objects. The position any object occupies in space is defined by all of these relationships taken together as one whole set of information. If I move my glass over here, I have changed its geometric relationship to all other existent objects everywhere in the universe. The information pertaining to that change is carried away from the object in the form of light waves and gravitational effects at the speed of light. So an observer on the moon with a powerful telescope would not be aware that her geometric relationship with my glass has changed until about 1.2 seconds after I've made the change. Thus far, spatiality has been described in terms of objects and the geometric ratios between their positions, but space itself exists on a more fundamental level than these. Just as the form an object occupies in space is comprised of the geometric relationships between the points on that object, the form of space itself is comprised of the geometric relationships between points in space. A point in space can be thought of as a possible position in space, and each is distinct from every other in a precise network of geometric relations. In the absence of the geometric framework supplied by the relationships between possible points, no object could relate to itself, no objects could have positions relative to one another, and spatiality itself could not exist. In other words, without the span of possible points between here and here, these 2 positions could not have the geometric relationship they do. The succession of distinct possible points makes up the fabric of the geometric space separating them. This raises a key question. If the existence of space is dependent on the existence of the logic of geometry, what must it take for that logic to exist? As we explore the components necessary to the existence of physical objects, an interesting dichotomy becomes apparent. All physical objects occupy space and change over time, yet these physical characteristics arise out of the logic of geometry and the laws of physics. The laws themselves must be non-physical because they do not take up space, nor do they change over time. Have we stumbled upon something that is not real since it doesn't fit the template outlining the nature of things we can touch, see, and physically manipulate? I think you won't be surprised to hear me answer this question with, of course not. The non-physical exists just as fully as the physical, and in fact stands as the foundation and fabric of the physical. Quite a claim. This video will explain what is meant here by non-physical, and will show how a correct understanding of our beloved physical reality has non-physical reality as its basis. In pinning down the nature of the non-physical, the word information is of central importance. To be precise, let me define it in this way. Any fact which is true of reality constitutes information. Is it factual that you are watching this video right now? Then that fact makes up part of the information describing the state of reality. The form an object occupies in space is the embodiment of that object's geometric relationships. In other words, those geometric relationships represent the information, the totality of the facts comprising the spatial reality of the object in question. Physical objects change over time due to causality, a logical progression delineated by the laws of physics. Furthermore, the present state of the universe is the logical consequence of the causal chain which brought physical matter from the Big Bang all the way to the various situations it occupies today. The unimaginable number of distinct causes giving way to distinct effects in the past also represents a big old set of facts, that is, information, and the present state of the physical universe, with these sound waves pouring out of your speakers and hitting your ears, is the natural result, the embodiment of, a tiny subset of that information. These two informational aspects are shared amongst all physical objects. Their positions in space and time are the manifestation of the information describing the spatiality and causal history of those objects. There are many more specific sets of information which only pertain to some physical objects, but not to all others. For example, part of the information making up the reality of your existence includes your biological ancestry, whereas the moon, for example, has no biological ancestry. In general, the unique facts which describe what is true of any physical object comprise the identity of that object. In this way, we can see that all states of affairs, all phenomena in the universe, are nothing but configurations of information. Physical objects, therefore, only exist insofar as the facts which are true of them exist. The physical universe in general is nothing more than a complex, evolving embodiment of information. An object can only embody spatial information, can only have true facts describing its geometric interrelationships in the context of the logic of geometry. This general relationship between logic and information is all-encompassing. Facts can only exist in reference to logic. In other words, a fact's validity is solely based on the framework in which its trueness or falseness can be defined. While spatiality is perhaps the easiest real-world example of this principle to point to and explain, it's true in every facet of the previous examples. The nature and behavior of atoms depends on the existence of the laws of physics, which set up the logical framework comprising the existence of electromagnetism, of gravity, of energy and momentum, of positives and negatives, etc. The facts which are contained in the existence of any one atom are true only in reference to these logical frameworks, which also outline the possible behaviors that atom can undergo. These are quite complex logical systems, testaments to the extraordinary versatility of logic, how unimaginably intricate tensions of cause and effect can be built up from simpler logical components. The subtle and momentous power of logic is contained in this fact, that simple rules can lead to consequences of unlimited complexity. A nice example of this fundamental feature of logic is the game of chess. Once the logical rules of chess are defined, every possible game which follows from those rules immediately exists in the potential laid out by those rules. Every single game of chess, from the derpiest novice matches to the most profound championships, has simply been a realization of a possible game that already existed as a logical consequence of the existence of the rules of chess. As an illustration of how productive logical consequence can be, consider the fact that just the simple rules of chess allow for more possible games than there are atoms in the observable universe. There appears to be no upper limit to the complexity one can attain to by compounding logical rules on logical rules in this way. However, the same does not seem to be true in the other direction. If you turn around and begin to investigate the roots of all this complexity, as expected, things get simpler and simpler, inevitably reaching a point where the logic can get no simpler. These very most basic logical rules form the fundamental basis of all higher logical systems. While I believe it would take some knowledge of a higher order than humans currently have access to pin down just exactly what these might be, the conclusion that such fundamental truths exist appears inescapable. The existence of logic itself, along with the fact that all logical systems are at root based on the same set of basic logical precepts, gives concrete evidence of this conclusion. Without a foundation of basic logic, the unlimited variety and complexity of the countless logical systems we observe in reality could not exist. The most compelling theory for why such truths exist is that, at bottom, the most simple truths exist due to the logical impossibility of their own non-existence. These are called necessary truths, and for these to be untrue would invoke impossible paradoxes. Such truths must hold true in all conceivable worlds, since they form the logical basis for all possible worlds. This theory holds that the very fact of the existence of necessary truth automatically gives rise to all logical possibility. That is, the entirety of logical possibility is a consequence of the logical interrelationships between the necessary truths, in the same way that the entire set of possible chess games is a consequence of the logical interrelationships between the game's rules. All mathematical truths, such as that 5 is less than 10 and greater than 1, that 0 times any number is 0, that a square's diagonal is the square root of 2 times its length, and on. These are all automatic consequences of the existence of the necessary truths. The natural form of logic binds together all phenomena in the universe and accounts for why everything fundamentally makes sense. It's all rooted in perfect, eternal logical validity. This should all hopefully clarify the video's opening assertion that the non-physical exists just as fully as the physical, and in fact stands as the foundation and fabric of the physical. To summarize, physical reality exists as a necessary consequence of the logical possibility contained in the non-physical, the natural consequence of this logic leading to higher-order systems of logical tensions and interactions played out in the informational facts of the physical. That is, a subtle and momentous string of logical requirements based in the necessary truths automatically gives rise to the existence of energy, space, and the logical laws of physics which delineate the possible behaviors for that energy. These interactions are accurately and reliably understood in terms of mathematical relationships because physical phenomena are higher-order logical consequences of the same basic truths which give rise to mathematics. In other words, the logic making up the behavior of the physical universe is an extension of the existence of mathematics itself. The effectiveness of mathematics in the natural sciences is therefore not so unreasonable after all. Now, though expansive, this explanation for the nature of existence has so far left unanswered the central question: what does it take for information to exist? In other words, what does it take for a truth to be true? If, as we've established, physical reality is but information based on the existence of logic, what does it take for logic to exist, and for information to be based on it? As an inroad on this difficult question, note that through all the numerous topics we've covered thus far in this series, one key aspect of reality has been missing: consciousness. This facet of existence is simultaneously the most familiar and the most mysterious. It's also the most significant, since it's the faculty through which we experience every other aspect of existence. Now, there's sometimes a bit of confusion about the word consciousness, so let me clarify my meaning. Consciousness is simply the phenomenon of experience wherein sensations of any flavor or type are felt by a subject. Absolutely every experience of any kind is described by this term. Under this paradigm, any being which has experiences is therefore a conscious being. Now then, we can observe that the only way we can know a fact to be true, whether that fact is a rational idea like 3 times 3 is 9, or a fact of sensation like sunlight feels warm in summer, is through experiencing the reality of that fact, whether through comprehending its meaning or through directly sensing it as true. There's not a single thing we can say or know about the universe that does not come to be known to us through this primal faculty, the faculty of experientiality, of consciousness. Now, might this provide some clue as to the fundamental nature of facticity, of trueness and falseness itself? I argue, and other much more eminent thinkers have argued, that yes, this is in fact our only reliable clue in the pursuit of this video's question. Just as we can only perceive the reality of any truth through conscious experience, truth in general can only have reality through being known to be true. That is, all of the endless gallery of facts flooding our universe are only true, only exist because they're experienced as being true. Now, don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying that the universe only exists in the minds of humans, or in the minds of the living creatures populating the universe. After all, the universe gives rise to the existence of living creatures, so the universe wouldn't be around to first give rise to us if it only existed through our perception of it. What I am putting forward is that the being of the universe and all of existence is fundamentally experiential, fundamentally mental, because the only way the information making up reality can exist is through being known to exist. So, for example, in video 2 I put forward the argument that mathematics exists as a foundation for the physical universe. Here, I'm further arguing that the foundation for the existence of mathematics is the conscious realization of the infinitude of truths inherent to existence and underlying the logic of mathematics. This conception is broadly known to philosophers as idealism, a metaphysical framework which holds that the actual stuff of existence, the fabric of reality itself, is awareness, perception, knowing, or any other word describing the essence of consciousness. It's called idealism because it maintains that reality is fundamentally made up of ideas, and is the belief that something can only exist through being known to exist. This precept applies directly to the context developed in parts 1 and 2 of this series. Information can only exist through being known to logically cohere, through being known to not be false. That is, a fact can only be known to be true through the awareness of its logical content. Idealism holds that the absolute basis of reality is a fundamental subjectivity which experiences the reality of existence into being, both through knowing the unspeakable volume of physical facts making up the state and evolution of our universe, and the infinite and eternal sum of abstract possibilities. Another way of saying this is that every fact describing reality, no matter how minute or trivial, is accounted for, and that account is held in the knowledge of some fundamental knower. For example, if I move this rock from here to here, the content of universal knowing is altered by that action to account for the new geometric location of that rock, and the causal chain which led to that change, and which follows from it, including you witnessing that change. I'll pause here real quick to say that while there are several different arguments I could make in favor of the idealist position, I don't really think the case is definitively closed by any of them. This stuff is just outside the realm of human certainty. So instead of hammering the point, I'm just going to get right into the interesting part, what this perspective means for the nature of existence and our place in it. Alright, first of all, what is the nature of this fundamental knower? Well, again, while I think it's definitely outside the bounds of any human capacity to comprehend such a one in any level of detail or certitude, following our premise that reality only exists through being known, we can conceive of the knower in this case as the supreme being, the heart and soul of existence. I'm tempted to call this infinite, all-pervasive awareness God, because this is the word I grew up with for the highest, most perfect being. However, I'm also extremely hesitant to use the word, since it has a whole host of seemingly erroneous associations. Let me try to clarify the distinction between my view of this supreme being and the traditional view of God, which was familiar to our distant ancestors. I can't see any reason to think of God as supernatural, as being separate from or lording over reality. My view of God coincides with the context of modern scientific knowledge, in which it appears that the universe behaves causally in accordance with logical rules, and there's no reliable evidence of a supernatural influence which trumps those rules. It appears that God is instead the experiencer of what is true following the logic extended from the necessary truths discussed in video 2. That is, the causal cascade which has physics and physical reality arising from the logical consequences of the existence of the necessary truths plays out and has substance only through God's knowing of that cascade. From this perspective, God is reality, and that every aspect of reality exists solely through being known to truly exist in God's awareness. Nature, therefore, is the natural embodiment of God's knowledge, and there's nothing supernatural anywhere in existence. This brings me to an important point I want to make. In my view, nothing happens for a reason. That is, nothing happens as part of a divine plan. There's no one in reality balancing the moral scales of justice, no cosmic reward for good behavior or punishment for evildoers, and no overarching cosmic narrative which we each play an important role in. This is why the worst possible things sometimes happen to the best of people. It's not because there's some entity controlling the world which allows those terrible, unjust things to happen. It's simply because such an outcome is physically possible. In other words, everything that is possible in reality, given the laws of physics, is allowed to happen. I'll expand on the moral ramifications of this line of thinking shortly. The next important point is that the idealist perspective can explain quite a bit about the mysterious phenomena of animal and human consciousness. To see what I mean, note that our brains act as information processors, gathering facts from the outside world and logically integrating them and modeling their content. This modeling creates a self-contained copy and reinterpretation of the information gathered. Remember, the idealist view holds that every fact in existence is coexistent with the fundamental awareness of the truth of that fact. So, for example, when the information gathered by retinas is modeled and reproduced by a brain, the experience of sight accompanies the existence of that information. Likewise, when sound waves vibrate eardrums and are mentally processed, hearing is felt. In general, in brains, the facts comprising the reality of the world which arrive through the sense organs are mirrored and reproduced, And the reality of those reproductions is, like all information, accompanied by the experience of the existence of that information in the knowing of the Supreme Being. Again, wherever information exists, God's awareness of that information, the experience of the reality of that information, exists. That is to say, the conscious experience we enjoy in life is simply a natural extension of the conscious experience which underlies the existence of the universe. It is the fundamental awareness which is coexistent with any information present in existence. So, this phenomenon, where experience coexists with the existence of information, includes the experience of the information which plants integrate and respond to in their lives, and likewise that which cells process in their various complex activities. Consciousness positively surrounds us and pervades us, with even the most minute bacteria likely possessing some degree of personal experientiality. Even the behaviors of atoms are known in all their intricacy to the infinite knower. In this view, the one who experiences all of our experiences is the same one who knows the universe into being. That is, the one looking out on the world through your eyes is God. There's no separation between you and God. In fact, there's no fundamental separation between you and anything. It's all one fabric, one substance. Everything is in God and of God's knowing. Of course, in life one can only experience the region of God's awareness which is attached to and generated by their brain's informational activity, but it's all one thing. If true, this would have profound moral implications, which I've already partly gone into in my first video. Who experiences your life? A human self would really be a particle of God's awareness which exists due to the information modeling performed by the brain. Conscious experience in life would therefore be a window through which God perceives and acts upon the world. We would all be one in our identity with God, and if this is the case, we should really wise up and treat each other better. This is what I consider to be my most important point. This understanding should help us cultivate compassion for one another and for all conscious beings, because the same one who experiences my life is the one who experiences your life. With this knowledge, there's no way I could happily take advantage of you while benefiting myself, because in causing pain in you, I'm also fundamentally causing pain in me, by causing pain in the experiencer of reality which we all share and embody. This brings me back to the disavowal of divine justice I was speaking about before. Again, I see there being no divine plan for the universe. It just exists and proceeds as an expression of logical possibility derived from the necessary truths. Because of this, truly senseless and awful things can and do happen, like children dying or suffering due to illness, or the countless instances of torture and cruelty we inflict on one another. This isn't because the world is cruel or because God doesn't care for us. Crucially, in this view, God is along for the ride through experiencing all lives. The one who is subject to all the chaos, the tumult, and strife of the world is also the one giving rise to it all, the knower of reality. God is alive in every being that has experiences, and must live out any life that happens to arise in this universe or any possible universe. This runs the gamut from the most blessed, pleasurable lives possible to the most hellish or tragic outcomes. It all unfolds with an automatic sort of justice, which can replace in our wondering the idea of divine justice. Every victim of torture, and simultaneously every torturer, is an embodiment of God living out both sides of one of the countless, sometimes tragic possibilities open to reality. Every act, heroic or cowardly, loving or hateful, creative or destructive, is taken by the Supreme Being, and the full consequences of those actions are suffered or enjoyed by that very same being. This is the big secret which life hides from us, behind an illusion we can't help but believe, because it superficially appears that we each have a personal selfhood separate from all others. This belief makes us each feel so important, a feeling we desperately want to feel. Unfortunately, it also makes possible acts of evil, acts of willful subjugation and manipulation, because it frames life as a competition between rivals, obscuring the real picture. This belief in our fundamental separateness gives rise to many of the foibles and tragedies that mar the human experience, and I think the moment we leave this outdated conception behind, we step into a new, more benevolent world. From the idealist perspective, we shouldn't be terrorized by the prospect of dying. Of course, I wouldn't bet my life on it, but I really don't think dying is the worst possible thing. Though it's extremely difficult, if not impossible, from within life to believe it, dying is likely just as beautiful a thing as being born. I believe that to die is to wake up to being God, with perfect understanding and boundless comprehension. To live is to wake up in any one of the countless outrageous circumstances the universe can cook up, and to have no idea where you came from or how you got there. To have no idea what you're supposed to do, aside from what your instinctual sensations motivate you to do. I think that outside of life, there's nothing else for consciousness to do but be God and know the infinitude of sacred knowledge which gives rise to nature. I think that God simultaneously experiences every texture and flavor of life everywhere simultaneously in a boundless dance of experientiality infinitely beyond all human imagining or realizing. From the inside of one of these lives, one can only experience the information involved in living that life. But from the outside, all is known simultaneously and fully from every angle and at every scale. So, to die into being God is just about the best possible thing that could happen to somebody, and also to wake up into life. That is, to wake up to not being God is the most interesting possible thing that could happen to God. Let me just make clear that I'm not pretending it isn't absolutely heart-wrenchingly awful when someone you care about dies, for the many reasons we all know far too well. It is consoling for me to imagine that for the deceased, death is a portal to a miraculous state of unity with God. But since I still desperately want my loved ones here with me, alive, this feeling doesn't have much of a role in the acute grieving process. Well, there's so much more that could be said on these topics, but I'd rather respond to your questions and comments than to keep on going here. Please leave a comment if you have one to add. I'll be happy to read and answer them. Thanks for watching.